Hello, and welcome to the House Party podcast with Ivory Innovations. I'm Jenna Louie, a director at Ivory Innovations. Our organization is dedicated to catalyzing innovative solutions in housing affordability. This podcast will tap incredible people from our innovations network. We will bring you the top entrepreneurs, researchers, and practitioners in the industry to shine a light on housing affordability solutions. Let's get the party started. Today, we are thrilled to have Kavya Shankar, Chief Operating Officer at Trust Neighborhoods, here on the podcast. Kavya has dedicated her career to creating more equitable communities. She's helped young people get more civically active through helping start the Obama Foundation and has supported access to economic opportunity through her policy work at the Obama White House. She started her career at McKinsey & Company, focusing on local and state economic development, and has lived in a total of 8 cities across the country. Through that, she's learned about a diversity of neighborhoods, which is something that we'll be covering today. She has a BA in economics from Harvard College and an MBA from the Stanford Graduate School of Business. Kavya, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. So let's dive in. Something we always like to ask our guests is to tell us a little bit about your background. So what's your story and what made you interested in, one, living in so many cities across the country, and two, maybe as a result, pursuing a career in the housing industry and with housing affordability?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. I came to housing affordability not at all from a housing lens. I actually came to it from an interest in place and community. And I think from a very early point in my life and my career, I had the experience of understanding that where you live, which of course your house is a part of that, but where you live ultimately drives a lot of your opportunity and outcomes. I'm from San Jose, California, and I'm lucky, on one hand that my parents were immigrants, were able to stretch and buy a home in a neighborhood with a great school district, which put me on a path. But also, as a very cool high school kid, I spent a lot of time chairing the San Jose Youth Commission. And that actually got me out of my bubble of my particular Asian immigrant neighborhood and got me organizing youth across the city on a range of issues. Housing, of course, is one of them, but it wasn't limited to housing. It was youth violence, it was high school completion. And I think that really showed me the importance of neighborhood scale work. And I better understood a lot of the challenges and opportunities related to specific neighborhoods. So that was, high school, but really set the foundation. And then I think later in my career, had an opportunity to work on similar issues from a policy and philanthropy standpoint, which taught me a lot and showed me the importance of housing, but I think left in me an eagerness to leave some of these larger, more top-down institutions and work on building something that really centers power and resources on community. And so I'm really lucky to be doing that in the context of housing affordability at Trust Neighborhoods.
So Kavya, I'm curious, what role or skill set do you think from earlier in your career has helped you most as you launched Trust Neighborhoods with your co-founders, David and Jason?
So I've really been lucky to have kind of a range of experiences, and especially experiences that have required me to bridge worlds. So even going back to my San Jose Youth Commission story, I was organizing my peers' youth, but then trying to also simultaneously communicate that to city council and the mayor. Or when I was at the Obama Foundation, I was doing a lot of organizing work with community-based leaders and then trying to translate that into a philanthropic strategy for a really big, powerful institution. And I think I found myself in so many moments in my life trying to navigate two worlds that might seem really disparate, often are even in tension with one another, and try to find solutions that work for both. And I think that's ultimately what we're trying to do at Trust Neighborhoods. We're trying to build the mixed income neighborhood trust model as a model that is trustworthy to community and also trustworthy to large pools of private capital. And often community is mistrustful of or distrustful of capital, and a lot of times capital isn't willing to take big bets on community. And so we're trying to build something that really helps deliver capital at a scale at the local level and keep the power locally. And I'm very lucky to have had experiences in the past that I think make it a little bit easier to bridge what sometimes seem like two very different worlds.
It's wonderful when past experiences, you never know how they're going to come up in your future. But, as a high schooler, maybe you could have never known that this is a role that you would be in someday. But so many of those things early in our lives are really important for setting us up for future roles.
Absolutely. It's kind of crazy that the youth commission program was probably designed to get people into civic engagement. I'm not sure it usually always works that way, but I'm definitely a success story of that program.
Oh, I'm sure they're thrilled. I'm sure they're thrilled. So that's a perfect transition to talking a little bit about trust neighborhoods, where the mission is to have inclusive mixed income neighborhoods. So can you explain to us a little bit about how creating this mixed income neighborhood trust, or MINT is the acronym, what does that have to do with creating place, investing in communities, just as you mentioned, and helping, to achieve some of that place-based outcome that you're excited about?
Yeah, so I think before diving into, what is a MINT, a mixed income neighborhood trust, I think it's helpful to share a little bit about what motivated the model in the first place. So I think one thing that the three of us, the three co-founders, observed was that we have this tragic dynamic sometimes in America where neighborhoods either face disinvestment or displacement. So you have some neighborhoods that have experienced disinvestment from decades of racist housing and finance policies. And then you also have this other set of neighborhoods that start to get investment, but that investment often displaces the very people that investment is trying to help. And so you end up with the displacement, especially of the renting community. And I think that's really what motivated the mixed income neighborhood trust model, which we wanted to allow neighborhoods to invest in themselves without sacrificing affordability and belonging. And so as a really quick overview, essentially what we do is we trust neighborhoods. We equip a neighborhood-based organization with this financing tool, the Mixed Income Neighborhood Trust, and essentially have that neighborhood use the tool to go out and acquire and renovate a scatter site portfolio of housing, with the idea of the majority of those units being held at affordable rates, the minority being floated to market rate and helping cross-subsidize, keeping the other units affordable in perpetuity. What you end up with is a mixed income rental housing portfolio, which allows neighborhoods to break that disinvestment or displacement dynamic and actually grow into neighborhoods that are diverse, mixed income, and importantly, deliver opportunity for everyone, especially the low income BIPOC renters that are so often left out of that opportunity.
And tell us a little bit more about how giving power and giving this opportunity for communities to invest in themselves. I love that language. What does that look like maybe on a more day-to-day basis? And why is it so important to give this kind of power to residents who, may not have a background in real estate, but want to have a say in their community? Kind of how does that work? And tell us a little bit more about the motivation behind that.
Yeah, so for us, community is central to every step of the process with the MINT. To start, Trust Neighborhoods doesn't even work in a neighborhood unless we're backing a neighborhood-based organization that's there, that has the legitimacy of the community and a vision around this work. During the setup process, residents are co-authoring the legal priorities of what this project is going to be focused on. And then even after launching, the management of the project on a day-to-day basis is done by a local neighborhood partner, and residents sit in the governance structure. And so at every step of the way, at every layer, community is really centered in both power and in process. I would say for us, the reason it's so critical is shaping urban environments is a powerful role that largely remains in the hands of white men, and white men who often don't live in the neighborhoods that they're having the power over. And so for us, it's not just about housing affordability. It's also about who has power and who has the ability to actually shape community. And so that was a really central point of importance to our team early on. I also think another important part of it for us was it's also not just about community, it's who's in the community. And for us, renters are so often left out of power structures. You look at a lot of neighborhood-based organizations and they're very homeowner dominated. And so one of the restrictions or requirements of our governance structure is renters also have a seat at the table alongside other community stakeholders.
That is super powerful. And the concept of how do you center people who would not typically have a say, and particularly who has had power historically in these kinds of decisions, is something that we talked about with Sarah Bronin, who was another guest on our podcast. As she was talking about the work of the National Zoning Atlas and making some of that data and some of the outcomes of these historically very centralized decisions. What does that mean for communities? And so to see innovation in action with Trust Neighborhoods, right? Here is a solution that is centering people in a very meaningful way in the future. So what's done is done, what's past is past, but in the future of how communities are shaped and formed is really exciting for us. And one of the reasons that we at Ivory Innovations are so thrilled to be working with you. One piece, just as you think about identifying these community partners across the country, how do you go about finding these groups? I know you've lived in a lot of different places across the country, but there are so many cities. What does that process look like?
So it's actually, it happens in a lot of different ways. It's both inbound and outbound. So, for example, we're currently exploring a partnership with a group of neighborhood organizations in St. Louis, and they actually reached out to us via our website. They had run a strategic planning process and had concluded that an acquisition fund would be a really powerful tool in their toolbox. Heard about the Mint model and realized that there were a lot of overlap and similarities, and so just sent us an email through our website. Other times we got an introduction through a trusted partner. It could be an enterprise or local office. It could be someone who works in city government. It could be a referral from an existing neighborhood partner. Our partner in Tulsa, Growing Together, is part of the Purpose-Built Communities Network, and so they're plugged into a community of neighborhood organizations across the country, and so they've referred us to a couple of organizations before. So it's a little bit of us finding neighborhood partners, but also neighborhood partners finding us as well.
Amazing. Well, I wonder if a call to action for our listeners is if you know a neighborhood organization that might be a good fit for what Kavya's describing, don't be afraid to reach out.
Yeah, we are always looking to back organizations that are focused on prioritizing renters and protecting them from displacement. And we'd love to work with you or anyone that you know.
Perfect. So another piece that I'm curious to talk about is just the kind of structure of Trust Neighborhoods and how you achieve your mission. So you have a really socially oriented mission, obviously, focusing on building communities, helping residents and neighborhoods invest in themselves as they grow. And you also have a hybrid funding model of both using philanthropic dollars or grants and also investments to fund your work. So I've heard these types of businesses described as social enterprises, and we work with a few of them here in the housing space in our work at Ivory Innovations. I'm curious, just given your background and the types of organizations you've worked with in the past, what advice would you give to others who are interested in either starting a social enterprise that has kind of a dual funding model or working at a social enterprise as you've gotten everything started with your co-founders?
Yes, I think I have two pieces of advice. I think the first is don't default into a VC-backed model if you're trying to do a social enterprise. I think that model works really well for certain businesses, but it's not the only form of a social enterprise and can often create dynamics related to scale or certain milestones that might not make sense for the specifics of your business. To be clear, there are a lot of businesses where that's an amazing pathway for accessing capital. But for us, we ended up actually structuring as a nonprofit. We hope to be a profitable nonprofit, but we decided to structure as a nonprofit because we felt like that was the best way to achieve our mission and keep as much of that capital as possible in neighborhoods. So I would say, think broadly about the type of structure of your organization. There are a lot of different ways to do it and a lot of different sources of capital that want to help you achieve your objectives. I think the second piece of advice I would have is social enterprises are hard because you're right. If you're running a business, you have one clear primary objective, which is maximizing profit. And social enterprises are a lot more complicated than that. And so I would say really stay centered on the impact that you're trying to deliver. I think that especially in capital intensive industries like housing, you could run the risk of trying to access big pools of capital. And so your model can drift away from what you originally aspirationally wanted it to be because you're hearing certain expectations from capital around returns or liquidity or control. And I would say, stay rooted in community and the impact. And I think the more of us that are operating that way, the more we can band together and push capital to think differently and not expect impact solutions to deliver the same market rate returns as other investable opportunities. And if we're going to tackle these really complicated challenges, we need to build out a broader range of capital solutions. So it's something we're really focused on. A lot of other people are focused on too, but I would invite you to join us in this fight to encourage more impact-based investing.
Well, maybe this is a good opportunity to ask about a specific example from one of the 4 mints that you've launched already across the country. So what has the fundraising process looked like in one of those cities? How have the conversations around finding diverse sets of capital that are aligned with your mission gone? Kind of tell us about an example of how it's going.
Yeah, so I can use the East Boston Neighborhood Trust as an example, which launched in September. It was an amazing set of partners that came together, ranging from the East Boston Community Development Corporation, City Life Vida Urbana, which is a Latino tenant organizing group, the City of Boston, the philanthropic community, Trust Neighborhoods, a number of other individuals and families. So that was a really, really incredible project that launched in September that at close acquired 114 units and took them off the speculative market and put them into community control. The fundraising process was tough. I think that it goes back to we're building out a capital market category that looks a little bit different from other products. Investors don't have control. Control sits locally. We think that's critical to the impact, but that's not always something investors are used to. The returns from a cash flow perspective look fine, but we never sell the units. The units are meant to be permanent, affordable housing. So there is a liquidity risk associated with investors getting out of their position. So, in some ways, this is a really traditional investment. In other ways, we have these unique aspects that are critical to innovation, but make it a little bit more complicated for investors to diligence. And we found 3 categories in particular of investors who have been excited about supporting the equity. It's really been foundation program related investment, eager to make equity PRIs, impact first family offices that care about the returns, but really are excited about the deep impact that these projects will have. And then taxable individuals who often are place-based and understand, know East Boston, understand the struggles East Boston has gone through, and are eager to see renters protected in that community. I always, when people are skeptical about the capital raising process, I always tell them we don't need every impact investor to think this way. We just need a small fraction of the overall investing community to be willing to take a bet on models like ours. And in the grand scheme of the amount of capital out there, it's not actually that much to help support projects like ours, models like ours, and so many others that exist.
One thing that I find really fun about the Trust Neighborhoods model too is just when we think about housing innovation and Ivory innovations, of course, we're looking at a national scale for people who are working on solutions that are novel and different and could have a meaningful impact. And of course, Trust Neighborhoods fits there. But something that I find really interesting about how you are raising capital is that it is place-based. And housing is so place-based. And it's something that I think about a lot when it comes to how do you deploy capital? How do you deploy funds on novel solutions? But sometimes people who are interested in housing say, I'm really interested in novel solutions for housing. I would love for that to be in my neighborhood, for me to invest in it at home, as opposed to investing, if I live in San Francisco, I don't know if I want to put my money to work in Texas or in Boston. I want you to come to my city. And so what I love about Trust Neighborhoods is that you have that flexibility. You have a really scalable model that can be deployed in different places and meet people where they are in terms of how they're looking to make a difference, with the money that they have or with the funding that they have. Has that been something that you found, is that people are very interested in kind of investing in a place that they know well, as opposed to investing more broadly, in a place that they know less?
I would say there are two types of investors, and sometimes there's an overlap, but they're absolutely the set of investors who, Chicago is their home and they want to put their capital to work in the context of Chicago, housing or otherwise. They're motivated by the success of the city. And then we have funders who are broadly interested in new ways of working, especially in an industry like housing that can feel kind of arcane and bureaucratic at times, excitement around innovation and solutions that are trying something new. And so what we've actually done ourselves is we're in the process of putting together a national fund. That fund will help pool capital that comes from investors who care about housing innovation broadly and are less place-based. And we'll also continue to raise capital locally for a project that's happening in a specific city, in a specific neighborhood. So our hope is to find investors who care about, both of those things at the same time or one or the other. But it is tricky when housing is it goes back to what I said at the beginning around place matters. People understand how much housing is rooted in place. And so there's often a motivation around a specific geography.
That makes absolute sense. And I'm so glad to hear that there are those two types of investors. I would say Ivory Innovations is a little bit of the second, right, where we're looking for ideas across the country, but it's really nice. It's really nice to be able to involve both.
Yep.
What can we look forward to this year in either the housing industry or from Trust Neighborhoods as you all keep growing?
Well, as I'm sure many listeners know, it's a very volatile time for housing with the interest rate environment. And so I think, though, this is giving me hope. Historically, when we've had volatility in the housing market, it's been the well-resourced private actors who don't always have the best impact or intentions that are the best equipped to be nimble enough to navigate those moments. But I think we're really seeing a moment of investment in actors with better intentions. We're seeing a lot of investment in the capacity of community land trusts and teams like Black Star Stability, in mixed income neighborhood trust, MINTS. And the hope is that all of these entities and others will be capitalized in a way that they can actually take advantage of the volatility, and rather than doing it in a way to make money, do it in a way where they're actually taking these assets off the market and holding them in community control. And I'm optimistic about what some of this volatility can hold. And we might emerge from this moment with a lot more assets under community control. And I think that would be a huge win.
I'm so excited that you mentioned Black Star Stability, because John Green was also one of our podcast guests. And
amazing.
So, yes, for our listeners, if you haven't listened to that episode yet, check it out. Black Star Stability, just as Kavya said, is doing some really wonderful things to help low-income folks across the country access better financing products and keeping them in affordable units for a long time, and in ways that that help them thrive. Kavya, anything else before we sign off?
I don't think so. I am very appreciative of the work that Ivory Innovations is doing. And honestly, we need more models, not fewer. And so I hope you guys listen to all of the other episodes as well. It's a moment of a lot of innovation in housing. And I think that as an organization that is trying to do something new that can feel hard at times, it feels really good to know we have peers all over the country who are also trying to make a difference in this space. So thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here, Kavya. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.